The gunshot that tore through Oliver Irving's left shoulder wasn't what made him finally decide to leave the ranch, but the quiet way his foreman looked at him afterward, like he was already dead, sealed it in his mind. The year was 1883, and Panamint, California had become less a town and more a graveyard for dreams, mines closing faster than whiskey bottles at the saloon, families packing up their wagons and heading east or west, anywhere but the drying bowl of desert they'd staked their hopes on. Oliver pressed his hand against the bleeding wound, teeth gritted as he stumbled back toward the ranch house. The man who'd shot him, some drifter looking to steal cattle in broad daylight, lay face down in the dirt, courtesy of Oliver's faster draw. But the victory felt hollow. This was the third attack in as many months, and each time the violence came closer to taking everything from him. The ranch that his father had built, that Oliver had inherited at 23, stretched across 2,000 acres of increasingly barren land. The drought had lasted 2 years, turning creeks into dust and grass into brittle memories. He made it to the porch before his legs gave out, collapsing against the weathered wood. His foreman, Jack, rushed over with torn cloth to bind the wound. "You need a doctor," Jack said, his weathered face creased with worry. "That bullet went clean through, but infection is the real killer out here." "Town doctor left last month," Oliver managed through the pain. "Remember, said there wasn't enough money left in Panamint to keep him here." "Then we ride to Lone Pine. It's only a day's journey." Oliver nodded, the movement sending fresh waves of pain through his shoulder. As Jack helped him into the house, Oliver looked back at the ranch, the place where he'd been born, where his parents were buried on the hill overlooking the valley. His father had always said land was everything, that a man without land was a man without purpose. But what good was land that killed you slowly, that attracted vultures and thieves, that demanded blood and gave back only dust? They left within the hour, Oliver barely conscious in the saddle, Jack leading both horses through the desert heat. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the air thick and wavering. Oliver drifted in and out, fever already setting in, and in his delirium he saw his father's face, disappointed and stern, asking him why he was abandoning everything they'd built. Lone Pine appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent, painting the sky orange and red. The town was bigger than Panamint, more established, with actual buildings that looked like they'd stand another decade. Jack guided them straight to the doctor's office, a small building with a hand-painted sign that read, "Dr. William Chen, Physician." The door opened before they could knock, and a woman appeared, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun, her gray eyes immediately assessing Oliver's condition. She was young, perhaps 21 or 22, with flour dusting her sleeves and an expression that suggested she'd seen worse than a gunshot wound. "Bring him in quickly," she said, stepping aside. "Put him on the table there." Jack carried Oliver inside, the room spinning in Oliver's vision. He caught glimpses of medical instruments, bottles of medicine, clean white sheets that seemed impossibly bright. "Are you the doctor's wife?" Jack asked. "His daughter," she replied, already cutting away Oliver's blood-soaked shirt. "Olivia Reed. My father is delivering a baby across town, but I've assisted him enough to handle this." "What happened?" "Gunfight. Drifter tried to steal cattle. Bullet went through clean." Olivia's hands were steady as she examined the wound, her touch surprisingly gentle despite her efficiency. "That's fortunate. No major blood vessels hit, but infection is already starting." "When did this happen?" "This morning," Jack said. "Maybe 6 hours ago. And you rode through the desert heat with an open wound." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact tinged with disapproval. "The fever is already strong. I'll need to clean this thoroughly, and it's going to hurt." hold him down. What followed was pain unlike anything Oliver had experienced. Olivia poured something that burned like hellfire into the wound front and back, while Jack held him to the table. Oliver heard himself screaming, the sound distant and animal-like. But through it all, Olivia's voice remained calm, explaining what she was doing, why it was necessary, promising it would be over soon. When the worst passed, Oliver lay gasping on the table, sweat-soaked and trembling. Olivia was stitching the wound now, her needle precise and quick. "You'll need to stay in town for at least a week," she said. "The wound needs watching. Any sign of spreading infection, any red streaks moving up your arm, and we'll have more serious problems." "Can't afford a week," Oliver mumbled, though his body disagreed with every word. "Can you afford dying?" Olivia replied, not looking up from her work. "Because that's the alternative. Your foreman can return to your ranch and handle things. You're in no condition to ride." Jack nodded. "She's right, Oliver. I'll head back, keep things running. You heal up." Oliver wanted to argue, but the fever and exhaustion dragged him down into darkness before he could form the words. He woke in a bed, clean sheets tucked around him, late afternoon light streaming through a window. His shoulder throbbed with a deep, persistent ache, but the sharp, tearing pain had subsided. He was shirtless, bandages wrapped expertly around his torso and shoulder. The room was small but clean, with simple furniture and curtains that moved gently in the breeze. Olivia entered carrying a tray with soup and bread. She set it on the bedside table and checked his forehead with the back of her hand. "Fever's down," she said. "That's a good sign. Think you can eat something? Where am I? Our boarding room. We keep it for patients who need watching." "Your foreman paid for the week before he left. He seemed like a good man, worried about you." Oliver tried to sit up, but Olivia pressed him back down with surprising strength. "Not yet. You lost a lot of blood and your body is fighting infection. Rest is what you need now." She propped pillows behind him so he could eat without sitting fully upright. "I'm Olivia, though I suppose we covered that while I was digging around in your shoulder." "Oliver," he replied, accepting the soup she handed him. "Oliver Irving. I own a ranch outside Panamint. Owned or own?" The question caught him off guard. "What? You said it like something in the past. Owned." He ate slowly, considering his answer. The soup was good, rich with vegetables and meat, warming him from the inside. "Own. For now, though I'm not sure how much longer I can hold it." "The drought hit you hard." "Everything hit us hard. Drought, cattle thieves, neighboring ranchers fighting over water rights. Panamint is dying. Most families have already left. I keep thinking I should too, but the land has been in my family for 30 years. My father built that ranch from nothing." Olivia sat in the chair beside the bed, her hands folded in her lap. "My mother used to say that land is just dirt and stone. It's the people on it that make it matter. When she died 5 years ago, my father wanted to leave, said everything reminded him of her. But I asked him if running away would bring her back or honor her memory. So we stayed. That's different. Lone Pine is thriving. Panamint is a ghost town waiting to finish dying." "Then why are you still there?" Oliver had no answer. He finished the soup in silence while Olivia checked his bandages, her fingers careful and professional. When she was done, she stood to leave. "Rest now. I'll check on you in a few hours. If you need anything, ring that bell on the table." "My father and I live just next door." She was at the door when Oliver spoke again. "Thank you for saving my life." Olivia looked back, and for the first time he saw her smile. It transformed her face, softening the serious set of her features. "You're welcome, Oliver Irving. Try not to get shot again." The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Olivia would check on him each morning and evening, changing his bandages, monitoring for infection. Her father, Dr. William Chen, visited as well, a kind-eyed man in his 50s who spoke with a slight accent and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of medicine. He'd come from China years ago, met and married a woman from Boston, and together they'd settled in Lone Pine to serve the mining community. "My daughter has excellent hands," Dr. Chen said during one visit. "Better than mine now, the steadiness of youth. She could be a fine doctor if medical schools would accept women. Instead, she's my unofficial assistant." "She saved my life," Oliver said. "Yes, she did. The infection could have spread to your blood. Another day, and you might have lost the arm. Another 2, and we'd be digging a grave." Oliver spent most of his time in bed the first 3 days, too weak to do much more than eat and sleep. But by the 4th day, he was sitting up, reading newspapers that Olivia brought him. The news from around California was mixed, some towns booming with gold and silver strikes, others failing as veins ran dry. Panamint was barely mentioned, and when it was, the articles spoke of exodus and abandonment. On the 5th day, Oliver insisted on getting up. Olivia helped him dress in clothes she'd cleaned and mended, his shirt sporting neat stitches where the bullet had torn through. His legs were unsteady at first, but he managed to walk to the window, looking out at Lone Pine's Main Street. "It's a good town," Olivia said, standing beside him. "We get miners passing through, families settling. The water here is reliable and the farming is decent in the valley." "You make it sound like paradise. It's not. We have our problems, claim disputes, occasional violence, the usual struggles. But people here are building something that will last. They're not holding on to ghosts." Oliver glanced at her. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" "I think you're trying to honor your father by keeping a ranch that's killing you. There's nothing honorable about dying for dirt, Oliver." Her words stung because they were true. He turned away from the window, suddenly tired despite having done nothing. Olivia helped him back to bed, but before she left, Oliver caught her hand. "Stay a moment," he said. "Talk to me. I'm going mad with boredom." Olivia hesitated, then sat in her usual chair. "What do you want to talk about?" "You. How does a doctor's daughter end up stitching gunshot wounds like a battlefield surgeon?" "Necessity. My father taught me everything he knows because out here, one doctor isn't enough. Sometimes he's across the valley, and someone comes in bleeding or broken. Should I turn them away because I'm a woman? Should I let them die while waiting for my father to return? Of course not. Then I learned. I studied my father's medical books, practiced sutures on leather and cloth, assisted in surgeries. When my mother was dying, I was the one who kept her comfortable when the pain got too bad. I gave her laudanum, monitored her breathing, held her hand when she passed. I was 17. The grief in her voice was old but still present, a wound that had healed but left a scar. Oliver understood that kind of loss. His own mother had died when he was 15, thrown from a horse and broken against the rocks. His father had never recovered, not really. He'd worked himself into an early grave just 3 years later, leaving Oliver alone at 18 with a ranch he wasn't ready to run. "I'm sorry," Oliver said. "It was 5 years ago. The pain changes, but it doesn't leave. You learn to carry it." Olivia stood, smoothing her skirts. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, if you're feeling strong enough, you can take a short walk outside. Fresh air will do you good." That night, Oliver dreamed of the ranch. He saw the house his father had built, the barn where he'd learned to handle horses, the grave markers on the hill. But in the dream, everything was on fire, the flames consuming wood and grass, the heat unbearable. He tried to run toward it, to save something, anything, but his feet wouldn't move. And then he heard Olivia's voice, calm and steady, telling him to let it burn, that he couldn't save what was already lost. He woke with his heart pounding. the room dark except for moonlight through the window. His shoulder ached, and when he touched the bandages, he felt the warmth of inflammation. Not infection, but the deep healing pain that came with mending tissue. The next morning, Olivia found him dressed and standing, testing his strength. She checked his shoulder, nodded approval at the healing, and declared him fit for a short walk. Lone Pine at mid-morning was alive with activity. Wagons rolled past carrying supplies, women gathered at the general store, men argued good-naturedly outside the saloon. Children ran between buildings, playing games Oliver had played as a boy. It was normal, vibrant, alive in a way Panamint hadn't been for years. "What happens when the mines run out?" Oliver asked as they walked slowly down the main street. "The farms remain. The cattle ranches in the valley. Lone Pine isn't dependent on one thing. That's why it'll survive." Olivia nodded to several people who greeted her, clearly well known and respected in the community. Panamint put all its faith in silver. When that failed, everything else collapsed. They reached a small park at the edge of town, with benches under trees that provided blessed shade. Oliver sat, more winded than he wanted to admit. Olivia sat beside him, maintaining a proper distance but close enough that he caught the faint scent of lavender soap. "Your foreman sent word yesterday," she said. "Everything is stable at your ranch. No more attacks, but he says the drought shows no sign of breaking." Oliver nodded, the news both relieving and depressing. "Jack's a good man. He'll keep things running as long as he can. But without rain, without the ability to move cattle to market safely, we're just delaying the inevitable." "So what will you do?" It was the question Oliver had been avoiding. "I don't know. Go back, keep fighting, probably die in some pointless struggle over water or cattle." "It's what my father would do." "But what do you want to do?" No one had asked him that. Not Jack, not his neighbors, not even himself. He'd always assumed his wants were irrelevant, that duty and honor demanded he hold the ranch no matter the cost. But sitting in this park, in a town that felt more alive in one morning than Panamint had in a year, Oliver realized he wanted something different. "I want to live," he said quietly. "I want to build something that matters, not cling to something that's already dead. But that feels like betrayal." "Betrayal of what?" "Your father's gone, Oliver. Honoring his memory doesn't mean dying the way he did." They sat in silence for a while, watching the town move around them. A woman walked past with a small child, the boy chattering excitedly about something he'd seen. A pair of cowboys rode by, laughing about something only they understood. Life continuing, people living, not just surviving. "How much longer until I can ride?" Oliver asked. 3 more days, maybe 4. "The wound is healing well, but you need your strength back." "Why?" "Because I need to go back to the ranch, if only to decide what happens next." Olivia stood, offering her hand to help him up. "Then we'll make sure you're ready. Come on, you should rest now. You're looking pale." As they walked back to the doctor's office, Oliver found himself memorizing details of Lone Pine, the sound of hammers as someone built an addition to their store, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the way sunlight caught the windows and turned them into squares of gold. It felt like a place where a man could start over if he had the courage to leave the past behind. Over the next 3 days, Oliver grew stronger. He walked farther each day, helped Dr. Chen organize medical supplies, and spent long evenings talking with Olivia. He learned she loved reading, that she dreamed of one day traveling to San Francisco, that she made the best apple pie in the county, according to her father. She learned he could play the harmonica, that he'd once wanted to be a teacher before his father died, that he carried a fear of failure so deep it had driven every decision for 5 years. On the 8th day, Dr. Chen declared Oliver fit to travel. The wound had healed remarkably well, leaving a puckered scar but full range of motion in his shoulder. Oliver paid his bill, thanked the doctor profusely, and found himself standing in the street with his horse, preparing to leave. Olivia came out to see him off, wiping her hands on her apron. "Safe travels, Oliver. Try to avoid getting shot on the way home." "I'll do my best." He mounted his horse, then paused, looking down at her. "Thank you, Olivia, for everything. Just doing my job." "No, it was more than that. You gave me time to think, to see things differently." "That's worth more than medical care." She smiled, that same transforming expression he'd first seen over a week ago. "Then use that time wisely. Life's too short to waste it on lost causes." The ride back to Panamint took most of the day. The landscape grew progressively drier, the few remaining plants looking brittle and desperate. Oliver saw cattle carcasses twice, animals that had died searching for water. By the time his ranch appeared on the horizon, the sun was setting, and Oliver felt a heaviness in his chest that had nothing to do with his healing wound. Jack met him at the stable, relief clear on his weathered face. "Boss, you're looking better. How's the shoulder? Healed enough?" "What happened while I was gone? Not much. Few more cattle died from the heat. The Western Creek finally dried up completely, but no more attacks, so that's something." Jack helped unsaddle the horse. "Got a letter from the bank, though. They're calling the loan." Oliver's stomach dropped. "When?" 60 days. They want full payment or they are seizing the property." The ranch was mortgaged, had been since his father's time. Normally that wasn't a problem. Cattle sales covered the payments with room to spare. But this year there'd been no sales, no income, just mounting debts and dying animals. "How much do we owe?" $3,000. It might as well have been $3 million. Oliver had maybe $200 to his name, and the cattle were too thin and too few to bring anything close to what was needed at market. He walked to the house as darkness fell, Jack's words echoing in his mind. Inside, everything was as he'd left it: his father's old desk covered in papers, his mother's china cabinet, the quilt she'd made hanging on the wall. This was his home, his history, his family's legacy, and it was slipping through his fingers like desert sand. Oliver sat at the desk and pulled out the ledgers. The numbers told a brutal story. Even if it rained tomorrow, even if the grass miraculously recovered, even if he could get the cattle to market without losing more to thieves or heat, he couldn't make enough money in 60 days to save the ranch. He thought of Olivia's words. "There's nothing honorable about dying for dirt." He thought of Lone Pine, alive and thriving, people building futures instead of clinging to pasts. He thought of his father, stern and proud, working himself to death trying to hold onto this land. And Oliver realized he had a choice to make. The next morning he called Jack into the house. "I need you to be honest with me. If I weren't here, would you stay and try to keep this ranch running?" Jack looked surprised, then thoughtful. "No, boss. I'd pack up and head to Nevada where my sister's family settled. She's been asking me to come for 2 years now." "What about the other hands?" "Most already left. The 2 that remain are young, no ties. They'll find work easy enough elsewhere." Oliver nodded. "Then here's what we're going to do. I want you to round up every cow we have left. Drive them to Lone Pine, sell them for whatever you can get. Split the money 3 ways between you and the other 2 hands. Consider it severance pay." Jack stared at him. "You're leaving. The bank is taking the ranch anyway. I can either wait for them to seize it or I can walk away on my own terms. I choose the latter." "But this is your home, Oliver. Your father built this place." "My father died here, worn down and broken. I don't intend to do the same." Oliver stood, feeling lighter than he had in months. "This land has taken enough from my family. I'm done feeding it our blood." "Where will you go?" "Lone Pine to start. After that, I don't know. but anywhere is better than here." Jack was quiet for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Your father was a good man, but he held on to things too tight. You're doing the right thing, Oliver. I truly believe that." They shook, and Oliver felt something break loose in his chest, not grief, but relief. The weight he'd been carrying since his father's death, the burden of legacy and duty and expectations, suddenly lifted. Over the next 2 weeks. Oliver prepared to leave. He sold what furniture he could, kept only what fit in saddlebags and a small wagon. He stood at his parents' graves on the hill and said goodbye, promising to honor them not through suffering but through living. He wrote to the bank, informing them they could have the property and all remaining structures. Jack drove the cattle to Lone Pine and returned with $400, more than Oliver expected. The money was split as promised, and the ranch hands departed for new opportunities. On a clear morning in late June, Oliver Irving took one last look at the place where he'd been born, where he'd buried his parents, where he'd spent 23 years learning what home meant. And then he turned his horse away and rode toward Lone Pine without looking back. He arrived in the late afternoon, the town bustling with end-of-day activity. Oliver found a room at the boarding house, cleaned up, and then walked to Dr. Chen's office. His heart pounded harder than it had any right to, and he realized with startling clarity that he wasn't just here because Lone Pine was a good town to settle in. He was here because of Olivia. She answered his knock, surprise flickering across her face. "Oliver, is everything all right?" "Did the wound? The wound is fine. I'm fine. Can we talk?" Olivia glanced back into the office where her father was mixing medicine, then stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "What happened?" "I left the ranch, sold what I could, said goodbye to the rest, and rode away." "The bank can have it. You left." She looked stunned. "Oliver, that was your family's legacy. It was a trap, an obligation that would have killed me if I'd stayed. You were right, there's nothing honorable about dying for dirt." He took a breath, suddenly nervous. "I came back here because this is where I want to be. Lone Pine feels more like home after a week than my ranch did in 5 years, and I think maybe that's because of you." Olivia's eyes widened. "Oliver, I know it's sudden. I know we barely know each other. But when I was deciding what to do, where to go, I kept thinking about talking with you, about how you made me see things differently, about how being around you felt like breathing after drowning. You left your ranch because of me." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I left because staying would have killed me, but I came here because of you. There's a difference." Oliver stepped closer. "I'm not asking for anything, Olivia. I just wanted you to know. I'm going to find work, settle in town, build a new life, but I wanted that life to be somewhere you were." Olivia was quiet for a long moment, her gray eyes searching his face. Then, slowly, she smiled. "I wondered if you'd come back. When you rode away 2 weeks ago, I told myself I was being foolish, that you were just a patient, that I shouldn't have felt disappointed watching you leave. But I was." "Disappointed?" Hope flared in Oliver's chest. Yeah, she laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "My father said I was distracted, that I kept looking out the window like I was waiting for something. I suppose I was waiting for you. So what happens now?" "Now you find work and settle in, like you said, and I'll keep helping my father. And maybe when you're not too busy and I'm not too busy, we could have dinner together, talk more, see where this goes." "I'd like that very much." Dr. Chen's voice called from inside the office. "Olivia." "Is someone there?" She glanced back, then looked at Oliver with a mischievous expression. "Come inside. You can tell my father about your decision. He'll want to hear it, and fair warning, he'll probably offer you unsolicited advice." Oliver followed her into the office where Dr. Chen greeted him warmly. When Oliver explained what he'd done, the doctor nodded thoughtfully. "Leaving is sometimes the bravest thing we can do," he said. "When I left China, my family called me a coward. They said I was abandoning my duty, my heritage. But staying would have meant a life I didn't want, following a path someone else chose. I left, came to America, found your mother." He looked at Olivia with deep affection. "And I built a life I never could have imagined. No regrets, not even when things got hard." "I don't want regrets anymore," Oliver said. "I want to build something new." "Then you'll need work. Can you handle horses?" "Grew up with them. I can break wild horses, treat basic injuries, manage a stable." The livery stable owner, Mr. Johnson, mentioned needing help. "Good man, fair pay. I can introduce you tomorrow." And just like that, Oliver's new life began to take shape. The job at the livery started 2 days later. Mr. Johnson, a gruff man in his 60s with a generous spirit, hired Oliver on Dr. Chen's recommendation. The work was hard but satisfying, caring for horses, repairing tack, occasionally breaking in wild horses bought from traders passing through. Oliver's shoulder ached at first, but the pain gradually faded as the work strengthened the healing muscles. He found a small house to rent on the edge of town, barely more than a cabin but clean and sturdy. With his first wages, he bought basic furniture and supplies, transforming the empty space into something resembling a home. It wasn't much compared to the ranch house, but it was his, earned through his own work rather than inherited burden. True to her word, Olivia had dinner with him 3 days after his arrival. They ate at the town's small restaurant, talking about everything and nothing, her father's most interesting patients, Oliver's progress with a particularly stubborn mare, the traveling show that was coming to town next month. The conversation flowed easily, as natural as breathing, and when Oliver walked her home afterward, he found himself reluctant to say goodnight. "Can I see you again?" he asked at her door. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't ask," Olivia replied, that smile lighting up her face. They fell into a pattern over the following weeks. Olivia would visit Oliver during his lunch break at the livery, bringing food she'd prepared and sitting with him in the stable's shaded area. Oliver would stop by the medical office in the evenings, helping carry supplies or simply keeping Olivia company while she organized instruments and prepared medicines. They took walks through town, attended church on Sundays, and talked endlessly about their pasts, their hopes, their dreams for the future. Oliver learned that Olivia had once been engaged briefly to a miner who'd struck it rich and promised her a life of luxury. But when she'd refused to leave her father and moved to San Francisco, the man had called her selfish and broken the engagement. "He couldn't understand that my father needed me," Olivia explained one evening as they sat by the creek outside town. "He just lost my mother and I was all he had left. I couldn't abandon him for a stranger who valued gold more than family." "You're not selfish. You're loyal," Oliver said. "That miner was a fool to let you go. I think it worked out the way it should. If I'd married him, I wouldn't have been here to meet you." The way she said it, simple and certain, made Oliver's heart race. He reached for her hand, and when she laced her fingers through his, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Summer deepened into blazing heat, but Lone Pine's reliable water sources kept the town green. Oliver watched crops growing in the valley, cattle fattening on good grass, people working together to build and expand rather than merely survive. It was everything his ranch had never been, and he felt no regret for leaving it behind. One evening in August, 3 months after he'd arrived in Lone Pine, Oliver stood in his small house and realized he was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way he hadn't been since before his mother died. The weight of legacy and duty had vanished, replaced by the simple satisfaction of hard work, good company, and the growing certainty that he was building something meaningful. That night, he asked Olivia to dinner at his house. He cooked, not particularly well but with effort, and she laughed at his somewhat burnt potatoes while praising his surprisingly good steak. "Where did you learn to cook?" she asked. "Trial and error, mostly. After my mother died, it was just my father and me. He could barely boil water, so I learned out of necessity. My mother taught me everything about medicine and cooking. She said both required the same things: patience, precision, and knowing when to improvise. They ate by candlelight, the windows open to catch the evening breeze." When they finished, Oliver took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Olivia, these past 3 months have been the best of my life. You make me laugh, you make me think, you make me want to be better than I am. I wake up every morning excited to see you, and I go to sleep every night thinking about you." She set down her fork, her gray eyes bright in the candlelight. "Oliver, I'm not saying this well. What I mean is, I'm in love with you, completely, certainly, without question. And I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Olivia stood, circled the table, and pulled Oliver to his feet. She reached up, cupped his face in her hands, and kissed him. It was gentle and fierce all at once, full of all the things they hadn't yet said. When she pulled back, she was smiling through tears. "I love you too, Oliver Irving. I think I started falling for you when you grabbed my hand and asked me to stay and talk, when you were too stubborn to just rest. You were infuriating and earnest and so clearly lost. I wanted to help you find your way, and somehow you found your way to me." Oliver kissed her again, deeper this time, wrapping his arms around her and lifting her slightly off her feet. She laughed against his mouth, her hands tangling in his hair. "Marry me," he said when they finally broke apart. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few months, but I've never been more certain of anything." "Yes," Olivia said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They told Dr. Chen the next day. The older man looked between them, his expression unreadable, and for a moment Oliver worried he'd object. Then Dr. Chen smiled, the expression warm and approving. "I was wondering when you'd ask. Olivia has been walking around like someone in a dream for weeks. I'm happy for you both." "You are?" Olivia sounded surprised. "Of course. Oliver is a good man who makes you happy. What more could a father want?" He turned to Oliver. "I have only one condition. You must take good care of her. Olivia is brilliant and capable, but she sometimes forgets to care for herself while caring for others. Promise me you'll watch out for her." "I promise. With my life." "Good. Then you have my blessing." They were married in September in the small church on Lone Pines Main Street. The whole town seemed to attend Oliver's. Boss Mr. Johnson stood up as best man, and several of Olivia's childhood friends served as bridesmaids. Dr. Chen walked his daughter down the aisle, tears streaming down his face even as he smiled. Oliver waited at the altar in his best suit, his heart pounding as Olivia appeared in a simple white dress that her mother had worn at her own wedding. She was beautiful, radiant, and when she took his hand, Oliver felt like the luckiest man alive. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about building lives together through hardship and joy. Oliver barely heard the words, too focused on Olivia's face, on the way her hand trembled slightly in his, on the absolute certainty in her eyes. "Do you, Oliver Irving, take this woman to be your wife?" "I do, now and forever." "Do you, Olivia Reed, take this man to be your husband?" "I do, with all my heart." "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Oliver kissed her as the church erupted in applause, and in that moment, he understood what home really meant. It wasn't land or buildings or legacy. It was this woman in his arms, this community around them, this life they were beginning together. The reception was held in the town square, with food and music and dancing. Oliver, who'd never been much of a dancer, found himself swept onto the floor by Olivia, who laughed at his clumsy steps and taught him the rhythm with patience. "You're terrible at this," she said, still laughing. "Lucky for me, you're good enough for both of us. Lucky for you, I love you anyway." As the sun set and the celebration continued, Dr. Chen pulled Oliver aside. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For loving my daughter. For giving her the future she deserves. I worried after that miner broke her heart that she'd close herself off from love, but you opened her up again, you made her happy. She makes me happy too, more than I thought possible. Good, that's how it should be." Dr. Chen clasped Oliver's shoulder. "Welcome to the family, son." Oliver and Olivia moved into a bigger house that fall, a proper 2-story home with a garden and enough room for the family they hoped to build. Oliver continued working at the livery while Olivia assisted her father, their routines complementing each other perfectly. In November, Jack visited from Nevada. He'd settled near his sister's family and seemed happier than Oliver had ever seen him, with color in his cheeks and a lightness in his manner. Over dinner, Jack asked about the ranch. "Got a letter from a man in town," Jack said. "The bank sold the property. Some developer bought it, plans to split it up and sell parcels to farmers." Oliver waited for the pang of loss, the grief for his family's legacy being carved up and distributed. But all he felt was relief. "Good, I hope they make something of it that lasts. No regrets, not a single one." Oliver looked at Olivia across the table, deep in conversation with Jack's sister. "I have everything I need right here." Winter came, milder in Lone Pine than it had been in Panamint. Oliver and Olivia settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. They learned each other's rhythms, how Olivia liked to read before bed, how Oliver whistled while working around the house, how they both treasured quiet mornings over coffee before the day's work began. In February, Olivia came to the livery during Oliver's lunch break, her face glowing with barely contained excitement. "I have news," she said, taking his hands. Oliver's heart skipped. "What kind of news?" "The kind that means we'll need that extra bedroom after all." "I'm pregnant, Oliver." "We're going to have a baby." Joy exploded through Oliver's chest. He picked Olivia up and spun her around, then immediately set her down, worried he might hurt her. She laughed at his sudden caution, pulling him close for a kiss. "I'm pregnant, not fragile," she said. "But yes, you'll need to be careful for the next several months." "When?" "September, I think, around our anniversary." "That's perfect. Everything is perfect," and it was. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Oliver became increasingly protective as Olivia's belly swelled. She tolerated his hovering with patient amusement, still assisting her father with medical work until the final month, when even she admitted she needed to rest. Dr. Chen was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a grandfather. He doted on Olivia, checking her constantly, making sure she ate well and rested enough. Oliver and Dr. Chen grew even closer during this time, bonding over their shared love for Olivia and their anticipation of the coming child. "Boy or girl, it doesn't matter," Oliver said one evening as they prepared the nursery. "As long as they're healthy." "You say that now," Dr. Chen replied with a knowing smile, "but when you hold your child for the first time, you'll discover a love you never knew existed. It's terrifying and wonderful all at once." In early September, just 2 days after their first anniversary, Olivia woke Oliver in the middle of the night. "It's time," she said calmly, though Oliver could see the tension in her face. He scrambled out of bed, suddenly clumsy with panic. "I'll get your father. Should I boil water? That's what people do, right? Boil water." Oliver breathed. "We have time. First babies take a while, just help me to the clinic." The next 12 hours were the longest of Oliver's life. He paced outside the room where Dr. Chen attended his daughter, occasionally allowed in to hold Olivia's hand through contractions. She was strong throughout, focused and determined, though the pain was clearly intense. "You're doing amazing," Oliver kept saying, feeling helpless. "I love you so much." "Love you too," Olivia gasped between contractions. "But if you ever suggest this again, I'm going to remind you of this conversation." Finally, as afternoon sun streamed through the windows, a baby's cry filled the air. Dr. Chen emerged moments later, tears streaming down his face, holding a small bundle. "You have a son," he said, placing the baby in Oliver's arms. "A healthy, perfect son." Oliver looked down at his child, tiny, red-faced, squirming in the blanket. He had a shock of dark hair, and when he briefly opened his eyes, they were gray like Olivia's. Love crashed over Oliver like a wave, so intense it brought tears to his eyes. "Can I see him?" Olivia's voice came from the room, tired but happy. Oliver carried the baby to her, placing him carefully in her arms. Olivia looked exhausted but radiant, her hair damp with sweat, her face glowing with joy as she gazed at their son. "He's perfect," she whispered. "Look at him, Oliver. We made this perfect little person. What should we name him?" They discussed names for months but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Olivia smiled. "William, after my father. William Irving." Dr. Chen, standing in the doorway, wiped his eyes. "You honor me more than you know." Little William was a content baby, rarely crying, sleeping in long stretches that allowed his exhausted parents to rest. Oliver discovered that fatherhood suited him. He loved holding his son, watching him sleep, seeing Olivia nurse him with tender care. The house filled with the sounds of baby noises, and Oliver couldn't imagine life any other way. "You're my home now," Oliver told Olivia one night as they stood over William's cradle, watching him sleep. "You and him. Not the land, not the ranch, not any of that, just you two. My family." Olivia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "When you first rode away from Panamint, I wondered if you'd regret it. If someday you'd resent me for being part of why you left. Never. Leaving that ranch was the best decision I ever made. It brought me here to you, to this life. I wouldn't change a single thing." As William grew, so did the family's joy. He was a happy child, quick to smile, fascinated by everything around him. Oliver would bring him to the livery stable, letting him watch the horses, already planning to teach him to ride when he was old enough. Olivia would hold him while reviewing medical texts, talking to him about anatomy and treatment as if he understood every word. "You're raising him to be a doctor," Oliver observed one evening. "I'm raising him to be curious and educated. What he chooses to do with that is up to him." The years that followed were good ones. Oliver was promoted to assistant manager at the livery, then manager when Mr. Johnson retired. The pay increased, allowing them to expand the house and save money for William's future. Olivia continued assisting her father, her medical knowledge growing until she was effectively a doctor in all but official title. The town respected her deeply, often seeking her help directly rather than waiting for Dr. Chen. When William was 3, Olivia became pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first, leaving her exhausted and sick for months. Oliver worried constantly, but Olivia assured him this was normal, that every pregnancy was different. Their daughter was born in the spring, a tiny thing with Oliver's dark hair and a fierce cry that suggested a strong personality. They named her Margaret after Oliver's mother, and she proved to be the opposite of her brother, restless, demanding, full of energy from day one. "She's going to keep us on our toes," Olivia said, cradling the fussy infant. "She's perfect," Oliver replied, utterly smitten. William, now a curious 3-year-old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He'd sit beside her cradle for hours, talking to her in his serious little voice, telling her about horses and clouds and whatever else captured his attention. Dr. Chen, now in his 60s, began slowing down. He trained Olivia more intensively, preparing her to eventually take over his practice. The town had grown accustomed to seeking medical care from both of them, and when Dr. Chen officially retired 2 years after Margaret's birth, the transition was seamless. "You've made me so proud," he told Olivia on his last official day. "You're twice the doctor I ever was." "That's not true, Father. Everything I know I learned from you." "No, you've surpassed me. You have your mother's compassion and your own brilliant mind. This town is lucky to have you." Oliver supported Olivia as she took over the practice, helping with administrative work in the evenings, watching the children when she was called to emergencies. It was a partnership in every sense, each supporting the other's work and dreams. The town continued to grow. New families arrived, businesses expanded, and Lone Pine became one of the more prosperous towns in the region. Oliver was elected to the town council, using his position to advocate for fair water rights and support for struggling farmers. He thought sometimes of Panamint, of the way resources had been hoarded and fought over rather than shared. Lone Pine's success came from cooperation, from people working together rather than tearing each other apart. When William was 10 and Margaret 7, they took a family trip to Yosemite. It was the farthest any of them had traveled, and the beauty of the valley left them all speechless. They camped beside the Merced River, hiked through giant sequoia groves, and sat beneath stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. "This is what I dreamed about," Olivia said one night as they lay in their tent, the children asleep between them. "A family, a life full of love and adventure. You gave me that, Oliver. We gave it to each other. I was lost before I met you, drowning in duty and grief. You showed me there was another way to live. Do you ever think about your ranch, about what your father would say about the choices you made?" Oliver considered the question. He rarely thought about the ranch anymore, though occasionally he'd see something a particular shade of sunset, a hawk circling overhead that reminded him of those years. "I think he'd understand eventually. My father loved that land, but what he really loved was the idea of building something lasting, of providing for his family. I'm doing that, just in a different way. Not through land, but through work and love and raising good children. That's its own kind of legacy." As the children grew older, they developed distinct personalities. William was serious and studious, fascinated by medicine and often shadowing his mother and grandfather. Margaret was wild and fearless, climbing trees, racing horses, constantly covered in dirt and scrapes. Oliver saw himself in both of them, William's thoughtfulness, Margaret's desire for freedom. When William was 15, he announced he wanted to become a doctor. Olivia's joy was palpable, though she cautioned him about the difficulty of getting into medical school, especially from a small town. But William was determined, studying harder than anyone Oliver had ever seen. Margaret, at 12, declared she was going to be a rancher. "Like grandfather Irving was," she said with characteristic confidence. "But I'll do it better, with good land and smart planning." Oliver couldn't help but laugh. "Your grandfather would have loved you, Maggie. You have his stubbornness and his dreams. But will you teach me? About cattle and horses and land management. I'll teach you everything I know, but remember, it's hard work, brutal sometimes." "I'm not afraid of hard work." And she wasn't. Margaret spent every free moment at the local ranches, learning from anyone willing to teach her. By 15, she could rope cattle as well as any cowhand, break horses with patience and skill, and negotiate deals with surprising shrewdness. Dr. Chen passed away peacefully in his sleep when William was 17 and Margaret 14. The whole town attended his funeral, testament to how many lives he'd touched. Olivia grieved deeply, but found comfort in knowing her father had lived a full, meaningful life surrounded by family he loved. "He was so proud of you," Oliver told her as they stood at the grave. "He told me once that you were his greatest achievement, that everything he'd done was worth it because he got to be your father. I miss him already. We all do. But he lives on in William, in the work you do, in the lives you both saved. That's immortality, Olivia. That's legacy." William left for medical school in San Francisco when he was 19, having earned a rare scholarship through sheer determination and exceptional skill. The house felt emptier without him, but Oliver and Olivia were immensely proud. Margaret, now 16 and increasingly independent, announced she'd found land outside Lone Pine, good land with reliable water and grass. She'd been saving money from ranch work for years and wanted to start her own small operation. "You're too young," Olivia protested. "Mother, I'm 16, nearly 17. Plenty of people start ranching at this age." "Your mother's right to worry," Oliver said. "But I also remember being young and ambitious. What if we compromise? You can start the ranch, but I'll partner with you for the first few years. Teach you the business side, help make decisions until you're more experienced." Margaret considered, then nodded. "That's fair. And honestly, I could use your help. You know all the mistakes to avoid." So Oliver, at 43, found himself back in the ranching business. But this time it was different. No crushing debt. No desperate scramble for survival. No dying land. Margaret's ranch was small but well planned, with sustainable grazing rotation, water rights secured through proper channels, and cattle bred for hardiness rather than just size. Over the next 5 years, the ranch prospered. Margaret proved to have a brilliant mind for business, and with Oliver's guidance, she avoided the pitfalls that had destroyed so many operations. By the time she was 22, she bought out Oliver's partnership, running the operation entirely on her own. "I'm proud of you, Maggie," Oliver said the day she took full ownership. "You've built something solid, something that'll last. I learned from the best, both what to do and what not to do." She hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Papa, for teaching me, for believing in me." William returned from medical school 2 years later, newly married to a fellow medical student named Caroline. They settled in Lone Pine, William joining his mother's practice while Caroline started a small research program studying regional diseases. At 47, Oliver retired from the livery stable. He'd spent 24 years there, building it from a struggling business into the most successful stable in the region. His replacement was a young man he'd trained personally, someone he trusted to maintain the standards he'd established. Retirement suited Oliver. He spent mornings helping Olivia with administrative work at the clinic, afternoons visiting Margaret's ranch or working in his garden, evenings reading or playing with his grandchildren when William and Caroline visited. "You seem content," Olivia observed one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "I am. More than I ever thought possible. Remember when I first came to Lone Pine? I was barely alive, wounded and lost and clinging to a legacy that was killing me. You were half dead when I first saw you. I honestly wasn't sure you'd survive the infection. But I did. And then I met you and everything changed. You saved my life in more ways than one, Olivia. We saved each other. I was becoming bitter after my mother died, after that engagement failed. Focused entirely on work, on duty, forgetting how to actually live. You reminded me there was more to life than responsibility." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined. 47 years old, married for 25 years, parents to 2 successful adults, grandparents to 3 beautiful grandchildren. Oliver thought about the ranch he'd left behind, the legacy he'd abandoned. He'd built a different kind of legacy, not in land but in family, in love, in the community they'd served and enriched. When William was 30, he took over Olivia's practice entirely, allowing her to retire at 55. She'd spent 37 years serving Lone Pine's medical needs, delivering hundreds of babies, treating countless injuries and illnesses, earning respect that transcended gender barriers. The town honored her with a celebration, everyone sharing stories of how Dr. Olivia Irving had saved their lives or their children's lives. "You're a legend," Oliver told her afterward. "I'm a doctor who did her job, nothing more. You're wrong. You're extraordinary and everyone knows it." Margaret married at 32, a fellow rancher who shared her passion for sustainable land management. They merged their operations, creating one of the largest successful ranches in the region. At their wedding, Margaret pulled Oliver aside. "I know grandfather Irving died thinking his legacy was lost when you left the ranch. But you created a better legacy, Papa. You taught me it's not about holding on to something until it kills you. It's about building something that can grow and change and last. That's what I'm doing, and it's because of you." Oliver embraced his daughter, overwhelmed with pride. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you. You took his dream and made it work the right way." The years continued to pass, marked by grandchildren's birthdays, holidays spent with family, quiet days of reading and reflection. Oliver and Olivia traveled when they could San Francisco to visit art museums, Yosemite again to share it with their grandchildren, even a trip to China, so Olivia could see the land her father had come from. At 60, Oliver looked back on his life with deep satisfaction. The boy who'd inherited a failing ranch at 18, who'd clung desperately to duty and legacy until it nearly killed him, had become a man who understood what really mattered. Not land, not buildings, not even blood-tied legacy. What mattered was love, partnership, family built through choice as much as birth, and the courage to change when change was necessary. One evening, sitting on their porch at sunset, the same ritual they'd maintained for decades, Olivia asked, "Do you have any regrets? Anything you'd change if you could?" Oliver thought about it seriously. "I regret that my parents didn't live to see the life I've built. I think they'd be happy with my choices, proud of their grandchildren. But beyond that, no regrets. Every choice, every struggle, every moment of doubt led me here to this porch with you beside me. How could I regret anything that brought me this? Even getting shot by that drifter, even that. If he hadn't shot me, I wouldn't have ridden to Lone Pine, wouldn't have met you. So in a strange way, I'm grateful to him." That's a very generous perspective. It's the truth. That bullet wound was the catalyst that changed everything. Sometimes we need something dramatic to force us out of patterns that aren't serving us. I was stuck in a life that was slowly killing me, too bound by duty to see there was another way. Getting shot forced me to leave, to seek help, to end up in that medical office where a beautiful, brilliant woman put me back together. Olivia leaned against him. "You're going to make me cry, and I had such nice makeup on today. You're always beautiful. With or without makeup, young or old, covered in blood from surgery or dressed for church. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Sweet talker. Truth teller." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Oliver reflected on his journey. The cowboy who'd left his ranch behind had found something infinitely more valuable than land. He'd found home in another person, built a family that thrived across generations, created a legacy of love and service that would outlast any plot of ground. "You know what I told you the day I left the ranch?" Oliver asked. "When I came back to Lone Pine and found you at your father's office, you said a lot of things. You were very nervous, very earnest. I said this town felt more like home after a week than my ranch did in 5 years. I meant it then, but I didn't fully understand why. Now I do. Home isn't a place, Olivia, it's you. It's always been you. You're my home now, not the land, not any land, just you." Olivia kissed him softly. "And you're mine. Always have been, always will be." They sat together as darkness fell, the lights of Lone Pine flickering on around them. Inside the house, photographs documented their life together, their wedding day. William as a baby, Margaret on her first horse, graduations and celebrations and quiet family moments. Each image a piece of the legacy they'd built together, the life they'd chosen over duty and obligation. At 70, Oliver's health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down that came with age. His joints ached more, his energy flagged earlier in the day, his memory occasionally slipped. Olivia, ever the doctor, monitored him carefully while respecting his desire to live as normally as possible. William and Margaret visited more frequently, bringing grandchildren who'd grown into young adults themselves. The house filled with laughter and conversation, multiple generations sharing meals and stories. One afternoon, Margaret brought documents to Oliver. "I'm establishing a foundation," she explained, "for teaching sustainable ranching practices to young people. I want to name it after you, Papa. The Oliver Irving Foundation for Agricultural Excellence." Oliver was moved beyond words. "You don't need to do that." "Yes, I do. Everything I know, everything I've built started with you. You left grandfather's ranch because you understood when to walk away, but you also taught me how to do it right when the time came. That wisdom is worth preserving and teaching." "Then I'm honored. Thank you, Maggie." William announced similar plans, a scholarship fund in Dr. Chen's and Olivia's names, supporting young people from small towns who wanted to pursue medicine. "You both showed that you don't need to be in a big city to make a difference. Rural medicine matters, and we want to support people who'll serve these communities." Oliver looked at his children, now in their 40s, still driven to serve and improve their world. "Your mother and I are so proud of you both. You've exceeded every dream we had." "We learned from the best," William said simply. At 75, Oliver knew he didn't have much time left. His heart was failing, and even Olivia's medical expertise couldn't stop the inevitable. They didn't speak of it directly, there was no need. After 52 years of marriage, they understood each other perfectly. On a warm September evening, exactly 53 years after their wedding day, Oliver and Olivia sat on their porch one last time. The sunset was spectacular, the sky ablaze with color. Their children and grandchildren had visited earlier, filling the house with love and laughter before respectfully leaving the couple alone for their anniversary. "It's been a good life," Oliver said, his hand trembling slightly as he held Olivia's. "The best life. No regrets." "How could I have regrets? I've loved you for more than half a century. We raised incredible children, built a family that'll thrive for generations. We served our community, helped people, made a difference. What more could anyone want? I wish we had more time." "We've had more time than many people get, and I've treasured every moment." Oliver turned to look at his wife, still beautiful to him despite the wrinkles and gray hair. "Thank you, Olivia, for everything, for saving my life that first day, for loving me, for building this life with me. You're my home now, not the land. You always were." Tears streamed down Olivia's face. "I love you, Oliver Irving, now and forever. And I love you, more than words can express." They sat together as the sun set, as they had thousands of times before. But this time, as darkness fell and stars emerged, Oliver's breathing grew shallow. Olivia held his hand tightly, not trying to stop what was coming but simply being present, offering comfort and love until the very end. Oliver Irving passed away peacefully on his porch, his wife beside him, surrounded by the life they'd built together. He died as he'd lived his best years at home, in love, at peace with his choices. The funeral was held in Lone Pines Church, the same building where he and Olivia had married 53 years earlier. The entire town attended, along with people from neighboring communities whose lives Oliver had touched. Margaret spoke about her father's courage in leaving a dying ranch to build a new life. William talked about his father's kindness, his dedication to family, his unwavering support of everyone he loved. But it was Olivia who spoke most powerfully. Standing at the pulpit, her voice steady despite her grief, she told their story how a wounded cowboy had ridden into town and changed her life, how they'd built a partnership based on mutual respect and deep love, how he'd taught her that home wasn't a place but a person. Oliver left behind a ranch that would have killed him, Olivia said. He walked away from legacy and duty and all the things society told him mattered. And in doing so, he built something far more valuable, a life rich with love, a family that thrives across generations, a community that's better because he was part of it. He used to say I was his home, not the land, but he was my home too. My anchor, my partner, my greatest love. I'll miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I'm grateful beyond words for the years we had together. Oliver was buried in Lone Pines Cemetery, near Dr. Chen and others who'd shaped the town's history. His gravestone reads simply, Oliver Irving, 1860–1935. Beloved husband, father, friend. He found home in love, not land. Olivia lived another 8 years, dying peacefully at 83. She spent those years surrounded by family, helping William with his medical practice when she felt strong enough, visiting Margaret's thriving ranch, spoiling great-grandchildren who called her Nana and listened raptly to her stories. When she died, she was buried beside Oliver, her gravestone reading, Olivia Reed Irving, 1862–1943. Healer, mother, beloved wife, together forever. Their legacy lived on through their children and grandchildren. Margaret's ranch prospered for 3 more generations, always operating on the sustainable principles she'd learned from her father. The Oliver Irving Foundation taught thousands of young people about ethical land management, and the wisdom to know when holding on was strength, and when letting go was courage. William's medical practice expanded into a clinic that served the entire region, the scholarship fund helping hundreds of rural students pursue medical careers. The Chen Irving Scholarship became renowned throughout California, supporting future generations of healers who might otherwise never have afforded medical school. But perhaps their greatest legacy was simply the lesson that home isn't found in land or buildings or inherited duty. Home is built through love, through choosing each other every day, through the courage to walk away from what doesn't serve you and toward what does. Oliver Irving left his ranch behind, found home in Olivia Reed, and together they built a life that mattered far more than any acreage ever could. Their great-great-grandchildren, growing up in a changed world decades later, still told stories about the cowboy who left his ranch and the doctor's daughter who saved his life. They talked about true love, about partnership, about the importance of choosing happiness over obligation. And in Lone Pine, California, the town that had welcomed a wounded cowboy in 1883, their story became legend, a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave behind what you thought you wanted, to find what you actually need. That home isn't where you're from, but who you're with. That legacy isn't measured in land or money, but in love and family and the lives you touch. Oliver Irving's ranch in Panamint was gone, divided up and forgotten long ago. But the home he built with Olivia thrived across generations, a testament to the truth he discovered that day he rode away from dust and desperation toward an uncertain future. He told her, "You're my home now, not the land." And in those words, he'd found everything that mattered. Love that transcended place, partnership that created legacy, and the wisdom to know that sometimes you have to let go of what's killing you to embrace what will give you life. That was his real inheritance, the true legacy he left behind, not acres of dirt, but generations of love, built on the foundation of a choice made with courage and rewarded with a lifetime of joy. And in the end, that made all the difference.